Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have back with us Scott Leonardi, who's the founder of Complete Solutions, and we'll be talking about home health care or nursing home care. Scott, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Mike. Excited to be back on the program. How are you been?
Doing awesome. And I know this is quite the broad topic because people don't like to think about it, but statistically, there is a raising and rising need for people that might need that home health care or nursing care or long-term care. So talk a little bit about, get us started with what are some of the statistics that in the last few years you're seeing out there that you're now bringing to your clients' awareness?
Well, I'm really excited to do this podcast because I think this is an area that people just do not learn enough about. And reason being, it's preconceived notions. The old long-term care plans. If I needed some long-term care, I would buy that. And there's some different disadvantages to that. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But a lot of times they just don't think it's ever going to happen to them. Well, the problem is it's going to, right? If we live long enough, we're going to have some issues, and we are just living a lot longer. So, three of the biggest problems when it comes to long-term care issues, the first one is 7 out of 10 people, statistically, 7 out of 10 people before the Lord comes and takes them will use some form of long-term care or the other. Whether that's home health care, assisted living, adult daycare, or a full-blown nursing home care. So 7 out of 10 people. Well, people often say, well, it's never going to happen to me. Well, 7 out of 10 people, it will. That's the highest insurance statistic there is, except for life insurance. Because how many people have died?
Those same 7 out of 10 said it wouldn't happen to them, and then there it came. Yeah.
Exactly right. Life insurance, everybody's going to die, right? So 7 out of 10. I mean, if we drove a car and 7 out of 10 of us were going to get into an accident today, you probably wouldn't go on the street, right? If 7 out of 10
I'd be happy to pay the premiums.
If 7 out of 10 of the houses in your neighborhood were burning down, would you stay home all day holding the garden hose? Heck yeah, you'd be scared to death. So that's the first problem, is the statistics are we're going to need this care. That's statistics. Yeah. Right now, again, maybe you need 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years, 15 years. We don't know that. That's the statistic we don't know. So the first problem is 7 out of 10 people just are going to need it. And when they do need that, guess what? Nobody pays. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But the next problem is, other than 7 out of 10 people need care, is, again, no one pays. No one pays. Sometimes people think, well, Medicare pays for that, don't they? No. Well, I'm a veteran. Well, there's a little bit of benefits there, but they're not going to pay for it. Well, I've got a state teacher's plan. I work for Federal Blue. I got a great health insurance plan with my retiree plan. Guess what? None of those pay. And the reason being is because of the levels of care. Did you realize that there's multiple kind of levels of care? Did you realize that, Mike?
It would sound feasible, but I don't know what the levels are.
Yeah. Well, see, a lot of people haven't. That's why I asked that question. So realistically, there's like 3 levels of care. The first care is called skilled care. Skilled care is a very high acute level of care. You have to go into the hospital. You have to have at least 3 days stay in the hospital, which sometimes that doesn't happen because they kick you out of the hospital so fast your head spins, right? Yeah. So you have to have 3 days in the hospital to get discharged and then go get care. If that occurs and you're at a high acute level of care, you could qualify for what's called skilled care. Well, skilled care is wonderful because guess what? Medicare pays for skilled care. Your state teachers pays for skilled care. All the retiree plans pay for skilled care. See, skilled care is when you have an issue and a problem and you need to get better to get home, right? You had a heart attack, stroke, broke your hip, rehab, get you better, get you home. See, that's skilled care. The problem is skilled care doesn't last very long, right? You'll typically go into what's called intermediate, which is kind of a stepping stone. And then you go into the biggest area of care, and that area is called custodial care. Well, custodial care is when you have a problem with what's called ADLs. You ever hear of ADLs?
No.
Activities of daily living. What are the activities of daily living? Dressing, bathing, toileting, transferring, cognitive incontinence. See, those are the things we do every single day, and we take for granted until we can't do it no more, right? See, when we have a problem with that kind of stuff, it falls under the custodial care level. And under custodial care, guess what? Guess who pays? Nobody.
Oh, no.
You, out of your pocket.
Yeah.
Out of your pocket.
Got it.
So that causes the problem, because huge amounts of people today that are getting care at home, getting home health care or in a nursing home, they need help with dressing and bathing and toileting and transferring and that kind of stuff, which is custodial care, which means nobody pays. It means we got to pay it out of our pocket. Do you think that's probably a problem in today's, probably paying that out of your pocket?
I would think so.
You better believe it. You better believe it. Yeah. When that leads us into the third problem. The third problem with long-term care is the cost. I mean, take a look at the average cost across America for long-term care, and it's well over $10,000 a month.
Wow.
Some areas less, not many. Some areas more. So just think, if you're cutting a check for 10, 12 grand a month, every single month in and month out for your spouse. Think that'll do a nice job beating up your portfolio?
Yep.
Absolutely. So it eats up your assets terribly, terribly. So people really need to learn about long-term care. They really need to do. It's important.
And I would venture to say that 70% number that you mentioned, and you also said that there's so many people that go, won't apply to me. Those are the same people that probably don't put enough of an emphasis in their retirement plan and planning to put in a decent enough number, because probably no one's putting $2,000 or $3,000 a month aside, much less 8 to 10, like you mentioned.
You got it. They just want to stick their head in the sand and not kind of worry about it. But again, it happens, and you've got to plan for it. Now, why don't people want to plan? Well, again, none of us want to believe that, that we're going to become decrepit someday, that we can't walk and we need to be pushed around or helped in and out of bed. Nobody wants to believe that, right? They just think we're going to last forever, Superman, and then drop dead, right? I got this one client, he's 95 years old. He goes, just a great old guy. He's been a client for like 25 years. And he says, Scott, when it's time to go, nothing beats a massive heart attack. I said, really, Rod? He goes, yeah. He goes, but it's got to be massive. It can't be a little one, because you'll end up in a nursing home. It's got to be massive.
Yeah.
It's time to go, massive. And I said, wow, that's great. I said, that's my philosophy. Live long, die fast, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we don't have that. We can't control that plan, right? We can't control that plan. So it is crucial to really kind of learn about this stuff and see how it affects you. Because when it does, it eats up portfolios crazy.
Yep. So what are some of those ways that you can plan for that 70% possibility?
Well, great. I'm glad you asked that question. So most time when people need care, and let's say, God forbid, you need care, Mike, where do you want to get your care first?
Hopefully at home. I mean, at home, right? I would think. Yeah.
Oh, at home, yeah. Most people, they want to get their care at home, right? And that's wonderful if we can facilitate that, right? If we can facilitate that. Well, what does that mean? Well, see, sometimes people don't want to plan for long-term care because they think Medicare is going to pay and all those other reasons, but they also think, well, we'll just take care of each other. I'll take care of my wife, she can take care of me. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen, because your spouse is usually about the same age you are, right?
Yeah.
Right? So if you're old and you're older and having issues, your spouse is probably older. I mean, you're probably not a 75-year-old guy married to a 19-year-old person, right?
Yeah.
And if you are, if you need long-term care, that person's bolting. They're leaving, right? Yep. They're not going to take care of you, right? So the key is taking care of each other just doesn't work. See, people out there have a warped understanding of what caregiving means. See, we think caregiving is cooking and cleaning for each other. Well, if caregiving was cooking and cleaning for each other, Mike, is your wife caregiving for you right now? She is, if it was cooking and cleaning, right?
Yeah,
you're probably cooking and cleaning for her too. So you're both right. Caregiving for each other, right? That's not caregiving. Caregiving is when you can't get up. Your spouse has got to pick you up and put you into the bathtub, not hurt them, not hurt you. Put you under the toilet to go to the bathroom, move you out to the kitchen, move you back into the den, move you back to your bed. That's caregiving, and it's very difficult. So people have a warped understanding of just what caregiving means. So we've got to figure this process out and kind of plan for that, which is just crucially important. We're going to need care. So if we can't facilitate it with the dollars, I mean, we could use our own money, right? That's some people's plan. We'll just use our own money. Well, again, using our own money can be devastating if we need long stays in the nursing home. It can eat up the assets quickly. So what are some of the solutions? Well, number one, traditional long-term care insurance, right? I mean, you probably heard of traditional long-term care insurance. You buy a plan, pay the premium, hope for the best, right?
Yep.
You've heard of those plans, right?
If you need it, it's there.
Well, if you need it, it's there. But what's the problem if you don't need it?
You paid the money
20,
and
25 years down the road.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, 20, 25 years down the road, you didn't need it. You got a stack of receipts. But guess what?
Yep.
It's about risk sharing. I always tell people insurance is about sharing the risk with the insurance company. Why do we have car insurance? Well, we pay a little bit of money to share the risk with the insurance company. If we have a big accident, they're going to pay the bulk of the bill. Our home insurance,
but
same
if you
thing.
don't have an accident, you don't get those premiums back, do you?
Exactly right. Exactly. Like homeowners insurance. People say, well, I don't want to plan for long-term care because I know I'm not really worried. I'm like 7 out of 10 chances that you're going to need this.
Yeah.
I said, do you have homeowners insurance? And he said, well, of course I do. I said, well, you probably can't sleep at night if you didn't have homeowners insurance, right? He goes, oh, yeah, it's my biggest asset. I said, okay, great. Well, think about this for a minute. Have your house ever burned to the ground? Well, no. Okay, so you never had a full-blown claim burned to the ground, right? Well, no. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Do you ever do this? You get home, you tell your wife, listen, I'm just upset. And she says, what's the matter? You say, listen, we've had that insurance company for 26 years and we have not had a claim. I'm going to start a fire in the garage this weekend because I want some claim money.
Yep.
I mean, does that happen? Well, maybe sometimes it happens, right? But hopefully it doesn't happen, right? But see, we don't think that way. We think, hey, I'll spend a little bit of money and share the risk with the insurance company. Well, I don't get when people say, well, if I never need it, I lost the money. Well, you're protecting yourself. But I do kind of understand because long-term care, traditional long-term care insurance is expensive, right? We have to buy a plan. We pick and choose some benefits, and maybe that plan can be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year in premium. Well, that's a big premium. But what was the average nursing home cost a month? $10,000. Yeah, so a big deal. I'd rather pay $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year than $10,000 a month, right? But I understand why people think that. The other problem with traditional long-term care insurance, a lot of them, the premiums don't stay guaranteed, which means what happens? The premiums go up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a fun discussion to have. All of a sudden you've had the plan for 15 or 16 years. You hit 80 or 74 or 75. You get a notice from the insurance company saying, hey, listen, we love you. We appreciate you. Well, we're going to raise your premium 28%. Oof. That's exciting news to get, right? And usually what they'll say is, listen, well, we don't have to raise it. We can reduce your benefit if you like. Well, both those options stink, right? You don't want to pay more, and you don't want to have less benefit because you're getting closer to needing it. So again, there's some inherent issues with traditional long-term care insurance, even though it beats nothing. It beats nothing.
Yep.
Matter of fact, talking about having some planning. I always tell people you should have some type of plan. So I've got clients who maybe they don't have a large estate, but they are worried. Because, short-term stays sometimes can be worse than long-term stays. I mean, think about this.
How's that?
If your whole nest egg was think about this. If your whole nest egg was $120,000, and that's your whole nest egg, and all of a sudden you or your spouse, one of you needed care, you got laid up for 6, 8, 9, let's say 10 months. Well, in the beginning, you probably got some care paid by Medicare because it was probably in a hospital, that type of stuff. But then you needed 7 or 8 or 9 months of care at $10,000 a month. Maybe you discharged and come home because you got better, but you blew $70,000, $80,000 of that 120.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of tough. So sometimes the short stays can hurt people more than the long stays. So in those type of situations, as a matter of fact, I have a client specifically I'm thinking about a couple of weeks ago. I met with them. They were talking about needing a plan, and they were concerned about it. And so one of the things I asked them is, again, if you needed care, where would you want to have your care? And of course, they said, what? At home. I want to stay home as long as I can. So there's some very nice home health care plans out there that are pretty cost effective, fairly easy to help qualify for, and at least it gives you protection in the home. So now you have money coming in to help your parents caregive for you, help your kids caregive for you, to help get you some care to keep you at home as long as they possibly can. So even a short-term plan beats no plan.
Yeah.
I mean, does that kind of make some sense?
Yeah,
but there is
for
some
sure.
inherent issues with traditional long-term care.
Yeah, well, let's get into those because I know that anything's better than nothing. Done is better than perfect, or started is better than perfect. So let's at least get something in place. So don't ignore it. But what are some of those options?
So, I'm kind of excited to talk about this planning strategies, especially for folks who have actually worked hard. They built up a nice portfolio. Maybe they got 6, 7, 8, 900,000, 4, 5, 600,000, 2 million, whatever they got. They've worked hard and saved up these assets, right? So now they're rolling into retirement. They're a great adventure. And now they're potentially faced with a long-term care issue, right? Option one is to buy a traditional long-term care plan. But again, premiums can probably go up in the future. At the end, if I never need it, I spent the money, wasted the money, even though I protected the estate. But there are some very cool options that actually is a leveraging concept. It's called asset-based long-term care. Are you familiar with asset-based long-term care?
I am not.
Okay. So asset-based long-term care is a very cool concept. There's really kind of two parts to that. There's a long-term care life insurance plan and like a long-term care annuity plan. So the long-term care life insurance plan is my favorite concept. It's a leveraging concept. So what we can do is we can take some money out of your portfolio. We just reposition it. So if we reposition it from this account into this other account, do you still have the money? Yeah, you still got the money.
Yeah.
But we repositioned it into this asset-based long-term care plan. So we move the money in. That instantly creates a large pool of money for long-term care. And that long-term care can be used for home health care, adult daycare, assisted living, or full-blown nursing home care. So any level of care you can use that big pot of money for, right? So we put X dollars in, create a bigger pool of money for long-term care. So if I started needing care and I can pull more money out of the plan than I put in, let me ask you, is that a win?
Sounds like a win to me.
Yeah. If you can pull more money out than you put in, that's 100% win, right?
Yeah.
The beautiful thing about that concept is, let's say you're one of those 3 out of 10 that never needed care. You passed away, never needed care. All the money you put into that plan plus some goes to your beneficiaries income tax free.
Mm-hmm.
So now you get all the money back. Who thinks that?
That sounds too good to be true.
That is pretty awesome. So it's a leveraging concept. We reposition it. You still got it. If you need it, great. We've maximized the benefit. So if we maximize the benefit and we're using that pool of money, guess what? That money's protecting the rest of the estate, right? Mm-hmm. And then if we never need it, we get all the money back. That's a pretty cool concept. So again, people, I think everybody needs to learn about that concept. Now, I'd like to mention, I co-authored a book called Don't Go Broke in a Nursing Home with a very good friend of mine, Don Quante. It's called Don't Go Broke in a Nursing Home. If you get on my website, duckduckplan.com, you can actually order a copy of this book. I'm happy to mail you out a free copy of the book, mail it out to you, and then we can ask some questions if you have some questions on it. But it talks about all the ins and outs with long-term care, traditional long-term care, and planning. There's some veterans benefit stuff in there, but it talks specifically about that asset-based stuff. Everybody needs to learn about the asset-based stuff. Whether you do any planning or not, that's beside the point. You need to become educated. And that's the key. I'm happy to send you my book, Don't Go Broke in a Nursing Home. Just get on my website and order.
Awesome. That's really good.
Great stuff. Yeah.
So I tell you, the people that, again, we've said this so many times, but the people that think, oh, it won't happen to me. Well, 70% is a statistic that's been proven. What if it does happen to you? Well, I would submit to you that if you've put together that plan and you've got something in place that if it happens, you're prepared and it's not costing you a lot of money. Well, then if you're not part of that 70%, then the money's still sitting there and you're using it for all kinds of other things. So have those contingencies in place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. In fact, I was talking to this one guy just a couple weeks ago. A really super nice couple. They came in. They did very well. They had about a $1.4 million portfolio. Just a nice retirement program. Got some decent cash flow coming in, so we weren't worried about the cash flow. And I asked him, I said, what kind of a long-term care plan do you have? What planning strategies have you done? He said, we haven't really done nothing. We'll be okay. I said, okay. So what do you base we'll be okay on? Well, you know what? I don't think it's ever going to happen to me. And, of course, the wife is looking kind of like frowning over there because a lot of times guys say, it's not going to happen to us. And the woman goes, yeah, but what if it does? He's more worried than he is because that's how guys are sometimes. Yeah, we'll be okay. And the wife's like, well, maybe we won't be okay, right? And so I said, well, why do you think it'll be okay? She said, well, we have a nice portfolio. Got over $1 million. If we need long-term care, we'll pay for it out of our portfolio. I said, listen, Roger, I get that. I understand that. You did well. You saved up this money. But let me ask you a question. If you can boil down to why you're successful, why are you sitting on $1.5 million worth of assets? If you could boil it down to one single word, what would that word be? And I love asking people that because they come up with all kinds of stuff, ethics and blah, 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 work hard and all that. I said, you can't say work hard because how many words is that? That's 2 words, right? So what's the one word to boil down why you're successful? That's 2 words, right? So what's the one word that can boil down to why you're successful? And here's the word. leverage. I asked Roger. I said, Roger, let me ask you a question. You guys got out of high school. How much money you guys have in the bank account? They kind of laughed a little bit. I said, you didn't have enough money to pay attention, did you? He said, no, we didn't. We were flat broke. And I said, great. So what did you do? You went out and started working hard, leveraging your time for what? Dollars. You leverage your time for money, right? Once you got enough money to pay your expenses, what do you do with that extra money? You put that into retirement and 401ks and investments, and you bought stocks. So now your money is leveraging, making money. You're working hard leveraging, making money. Two wonderful leveraging concepts there. Make some pretty good decisions over your whole entire lifetime. Keep leveraging. Come retirement time, what do you have? A big pile of money because you leveraged. I said, so why in the world would you take a risk with that portfolio when you can leverage today? What if we pull a portion of that and transfer it into a long-term care asset-based plan? We're going to leverage that into 2 to 3 times a bigger pool of money than what you put in. If you need long-term care, you got the money. If you don't, everything you put in gets paid to the beneficiaries. Isn't that a wonderful concept? He goes, oh my goodness gracious, I love it. So again, the key is don't be so close-minded. Become educated and then decide, hey, I should plan or I shouldn't plan. That's kind of key. But get my book. You'll enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, let's, I think that's a perfect spot to wrap up. Have a plan, realize that if you don't need it, it's there. Get the book. And what was the best website to use to go pick up a copy of your book again?
Yeah, you can go to Duck Plan. I always talk about getting your ducks in a row. So duckduckplan.com. Again, I'm happy to mail you a copy of the book. I know we're kind of at the end of the podcast, but I love talking about this stuff. Let me throw out one more thing.
Sure.
One more thing. And that's the whole concept of taxes when it comes to long-term care. And sometimes people don't get this. If you don't do any planning for long-term care, what is typically one of your biggest assets? Besides your house, what's your biggest asset? 401k, IRA, your retirement account, right?
Right. Got it.
Well, let's say, for example, you need care, right? So you start pulling $8-10 grand a month out of your IRA to pay for care. Not only now are you getting slapped around because you need big expenses for your long-term care, but what else is happening when you're pulling that money out of your 401k? 100% taxable.
Oh, yeah, right.
Taxes.
Triggers.
You get killed on taxes, and you're getting killed for the healthcare costs. Well, there's a cool concept called the Pension Protection Act. And when you do that asset-based plan, and even some traditionals, we create that big pool of money. That big pool of money is 100% income tax free to pay for long-term care. So everybody needs to learn about tax-free dollars to pay for long-term care, and that's in my book too. So again, I'm sorry to go past our time a little bit, but
you're fine.
It is so awesome to learn about tax-free money for long-term care. People need to learn.
Yeah, when we talk about guarantee and tax-free, boy, that's just music to people's ears. So that is just spectacular. And also when you talk about things that people typically are either consciously or unconsciously ignoring. So I think that this nursing home and long-term care is such a important concept because probably if we were to poll 100 people in a care facility, a major percentage of them would have gone, yep, I'm not prepared. I should have done better. And these tips that you brought and the book that you're offering is just going to really help a lot of people. So thank you so much for coming back on, Scott. It's been a real pleasure.
Appreciate that. Appreciate it. It's great to be on. Good luck to you, buddy. Talk to you in the future. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.